Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior. Hey, everybody. And now that's Tom Dutta like butter. Anybody out there like butter? I certainly do. I learned actually recently, because I'm a home cook, that butter is actually not that bad for you. This whole thing about cholesterol, yeah, whatever. But hey, let's get going. First of all, we're live streaming. What does that mean? Well, today we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and Rumble, which is an awesome platform that I'm using now. If you are on any of these feeds, you can put a comment in the chat. You can have a question. We'll put it on the screen. We'll interact with the guests. That'd be awesome. I also want to tell you that the show is growing, and it's growing because of you. So thank you so much. Our subscriber base is growing on YouTube, and it's only because we have the audience that's interested in the great topic. So we have a great guest for you coming on in just a moment. One of the things I do want to say to you about this live streaming is that this broadcast is live. You're going to see us. It's like peeking in the studio. And then later it'll be reduced as later it'll be produced and released as a international podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and also as a Final Cut premiere. So lots of cool things ahead for you. Let me start off with asking you a question. What do you know about the topic of futures literacy? Anybody know anything about that? Well, I'm just going to add something to the stage, and we're going to listen to a video clip for about 45 seconds. And so stand by. I'm going to add that on the stage there. Let's just play this, and then I'll tell you a bit about our guest.
Futures literacy to me means an ability to realize that the future is not predetermined, and our efforts to predetermine it are sometimes not so our efforts to try and determine and establish a future are not necessarily effective. And so I think it's being futures literate means being open to whatever the future brings and understanding that the future will surprise you.
All right, we're going to take that off the screen now, everyone. I don't know. What do you think? He's got a good barber. Kind of looks a lot like a guy I know. Let me tell you a bit about Pedro de Senna, and then I'm going to bring him on so you can meet him, and we'll have some fun. There's a lot to him. I asked him for his resume, and I got like 10 pages. Usually I'll read a brief bio, but it's important to know the depth behind this man. He's a candidate right now for a doctorate by public works at Middlesex University in London. I think we'll hear about that. He has a postgraduate certificate in learning and teaching in higher education from the University Buckinghamshire Chilterns, MA in theater, a BA in graphic and product design, and a diploma design and visual arts at Oxford Brookes University. Now, when you look at what he does, he says that he's currently a theater maker. I don't know what that means, but he'll tell us. It sounds pretty fascinating. And a futures literacy and foresight practitioner. That's what got really excited everyone. The last part that I think you should know is this guy speaks more than one language. I mean, I speak a little French, parlez-vous français, but English, Portuguese, French, Spanish, Greek, Italian, Arabic, German, and British Sign. My goodness, how many brains does he have? Let's bring him on the stage. Hey, Pedro, welcome to the show.
You picked me up too much, Tom. I'm afraid it might become a letdown now.
Yeah, we'll soon find out. But hey, it's great to have you here. First of all, tell the audience, whereabouts are you? You're in a different part of the world than I am.
Yes, I'm in the United Kingdom right now. I'm in High Wycombe, which is a town in the UK, which is exactly halfway between London and Oxford. And in fact, we had a pub. It closed recently, but a pub that was called the Halfway House, which was exactly at the halfway point between central London and central Oxford.
That is very cool. So for everybody international, he's over here. I'm on the West Coast, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Truly an international broadcast. Hey, Pedro, it's interesting because I was born in the UK, not far from the university where you and I have some commonality. And I just wanted to share this with you on screen for a minute, just as a human interest. Hold on a minute. I was just given this book by my cousin who lives in the UK, and it's called The 212 Soldiers for the Queen. And this was the first regiment of soldiers, 212, men and women taken from Fiji, enlisted into the British Army in the 1960s. That was my father. My father's in the books, and my dad was actually there, and I was born on a military base. So I consider us kind of brothers. Let's get into Plato's Garden. Would you like to have some fun in Plato's Garden?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So stand by, everybody, and check this out. All right. Welcome to Plato's Garden. And everybody, what is Plato's Garden? Well, long ago, back in the day, Plato, he was an Athenian philosopher, and the first school of thought was apparently academy, from the word academia. And Plato would stand, and he and others would just talk and learn and transfer knowledge. What we're going to do today, Pedro, with you is we're going to do what's called critical thinking. So what we're going to do is teach the audience about you in three areas. The first one is what I call micro, and micro is really about the man, who you are. We want to know the successes, the gut punches, the setbacks that defined who you are. Second is mezzo, which is really the sector, I think, that you actually have created your work and your knowledge. And the third is what I call macro. That is the global world around you. And everyone, as you're watching, and by the way, Pedro, it's pretty exciting. We have a handful of people, over 5 now, and very rarely do you get that many people jumping on a live stream. They're watching us. So, hey, everybody, put a comment in the chat whenever you want. If we can connect the dots through these three areas, the idea is we get a deeper understanding and context of Pedro. Does that make sense to you, Pedro? I know you know this.
Yeah, makes total sense to me.
Okay. So
it's always a good exercise as well.
I'm going to throw something out now, and we're just going to riff and storytell. So the first thought would be, I think this is micro, your personal journey and insights. So your work, from what I know about you, it bridges theater, futures, education. And go back to your childhood too, but what was the defining moment that made you realize that performance could shape our relationship with the future? Talk about your mom and dad too. What sort of defined you along the way?
Oh, well, I mean, these are two separate things, but I can pinpoint. I can't tell you the exact date, but I can pinpoint the year, and I can tell you where I was. I was sitting on the sofa bed downstairs from where I am now. I was scrolling on Twitter when I still had an account before I decided that it was becoming too toxic for me. And I've been working on theater and teaching theater and making theater for the best part of 20 years. Then at that point, that was 2018.
Yeah.
And as I was scrolling on Twitter, I came across a tweet from a friend who happens to be the UNESCO chair in futures research. I didn't know that at the time. I had been I'd met him. He was my roommate, my flatmate when we were doing our master's students 20 odd years ago. And we kind of remain in touch, but sort of, a bit apart.
Sure.
And
just
anyway,
tell us what
UNESCO,
just define UNESCO quickly for the audience who may not know.
So UNESCO is a United Nations organ, and I can never remember exactly what the exact acronym stands for, but it's Education and Culture Organization.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And they, as an organization, they have chairs around the world. They are people who are considered to be prominent in the field of specific areas that have to do with education. And there are a number of UNESCO chairs dotted around the world that deal with the issue of futures in different aspects of it.
Gotcha.
And so this friend of mine, unbeknownst to me, was UNESCO chair in futures research at a Greek institution. And at the time, they were translating a card game called The Thing from the Future into Greek. It's a game that was designed by, if I'm not mistaken, Stuart Candy and Jake Dunnigan, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, and it's a game that I actually have it here, the Greek version, if you can see.
I'm gonna full screen you. Hold it up again. I'm gonna full screen you. Just put that back on screen.
This is the deck of cards from the game. This is the Greek version.
Wow.
This game is a bit of a, I mean, the original is a bit of a fetish in Future's world. You know, if you have the original deck of cards, I have the translation, which is cool anyway. But my friend tweeted about the fact that his organization were translating this game into Greek.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this looks really interesting. And from my point of view, because the game talks about different possibilities of scenario building, I thought this could be interesting for theater. Ways of thinking of developing stories and narratives using this type of card game to generate material
Yeah.
for performance.
That's
Bear in mind that this
cool. That's very cool. So now we have an understanding of what UNESCO is, and I'm going to put it back on stage. We had a video playing. We're going to go back into that again, everybody. It's a cool artifact that you sent me, Pedro. Take us back to the couch and what you were telling us about that early part that was shaping you. So back to that early bit of the story. Get back into that for us.
So yeah, so I'm scrolling on the couch. I see this tweet by my friend, looking at that idea, what he mentioned, and what I kind of started looking into the game. I saw this could be useful for theater. I reached out to him and said, "What is it that you're doing?" He said, "I work with futures," and I was like, "Okay, tell me more." And soon I realized that not only the stuff that he was doing and that future studies in general could offer to the theater, but I very quickly realized that the theater and the world of performance had a lot to offer to the world of futures. And so through that sort of casual coincidence that I'd be tweeting, that I was sitting scrolling on Twitter at the time and see something that my friend posted and reaching out to him, suddenly this whole thing, which I now call Performance for Futures, has emerged,
Wow.
which is this. It's a methodology, it's an approach, a way of using the tools and philosophies, if you like, from the world of performance and applying it to
Yeah.
structures and concepts of future studies.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So going back, I'm visualizing you now on that couch. About how old were you there? Just tell us your recollection. What was your age?
It was 2018, so I
Okay.
would have.
So it's 2018.
I,
So that'd be about 7 years ago. Let me go
yeah,
back
I would have
into
been 43.
awesome. And they say that the more we learn about each other, we learn about ourselves. And back defining where we're coming from. I know you started out like me as a little boy somewhere. Take us back into your childhood. Tell us about your mom and dad. What defined you? Who shaped you? And what are some of the challenges growing up for you before you kind of went into the world of what you're doing?
Ah, okay, so I mean, you mentioned in your very very generous introduction, my sort of my language is I'm from Brazil originally. My family are Brazilian. My
Yes.
mom and dad, um, my mom and dad were studying uh, in the United Kingdom, and they came to do doctoral studies here in the United Kingdom when I was 5 months old. And so I was very lucky in that from the very start, I was bilingual. I had English is not my mother tongue, but it was my first tongue.
Yeah.
And then Portuguese is my mother tongue. So the first 4 years of my life I spent in the UK. I went back to Brazil. I grew up in Brazil, but these kind of very early years kind of imprinted in me, I guess, this sense of understanding that the world is multiple from the start, that there are different ways of seeing, thinking, talking about the world.
Yeah.
Um, I guess two different languages are two different ways of not just of expressing, but ways of thinking. And I think that sort of was probably very, very important to me as I was growing up. And somehow it enabled, I think it sparked this curiosity about languages that made me interested in kind of like learning languages all the time and
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah.
So um, my parents went back to Brazil. I went back with them. Of course, I was a young child, grew up in Brazil, going to the playground, playing football every day, the cliche. I wasn't very good, but I loved it. And from the age of 14, I decided that I really wanted to do graphic and product design. I
Ah.
started learning geometry in school. And I fell in love with the simplicity and the beauty and how things just fit. And I say, is there a job that can use this?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily engineering, and it can be creative as well. And so, well, there's graphic design, there's product design. So I applied to this university, which is the State University of Rio de Janeiro, which is the first design school, the most traditional, really, really important design school in Latin America. Got in, was really, really happy. And in the meantime, I was a part of an amateur theater group with my colleagues at school, at high school.
Yes.
And we all graduated from high school. We all each went to their sort of like further studies, university, and so on. I was a designer. There was somebody studied to be a lawyer, somebody studied to be a doctor, architects, whatever. But we carried on coming to the theater. Our high school was kind enough to allow us to rehearse there on Saturdays and do our little plays. And as I was going through design school, I realized that more and more that I could not be in the theater. So we needed to design a book, for graphic design. I, a book cover. I did a book cover for Macbeth. We needed
I
to
would have
design
loved to
some.
have seen you drawing that one out.
Well, yeah, I'm a bit out of practice, but okay. Um, we needed to do when we had to do a full book. I wrote a play and designed it, using the tools back then, Adobe PageMaker or whatever it was
Yeah.
called then. It doesn't even
Oh
exist
gosh,
anymore.
you're dating us now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When we needed to do furniture, there was a product design. There was this furniture project, and I asked my teacher, can it be scenic furniture? Can it be furniture for the stage? Can it be? And my tutor very graciously said, yes, cool. If that's a project that you want to do, do that. And that was awesome because some colleagues of mine in my class uh, uh, went on with the idea as well. So we had two groups and we designed and we prototyped and we pitched to the theater company that I was with, the amateur theater company from my high school mates. They voted on the design that they wanted. We then built it. It was like a mini live project for a live client. I was client and designer at the same time. Uh, and and I realized really that what I really wanted to do was theater, and that's why I came to the UK to do my master's, and that's
Amazing.
where I met. Yeah, that's where I met Epaminondas, the Greek guy whose Twitter account then triggered this futures thing, So
Yeah. What a
it's
fascinating journey. So everyone, we're just following the dots here from your childhood. Are your mom and dad still with you? Are they still alive today?
they are still alive. They're separated when I was about 11.
Yeah. Now,
And
uh,
yeah,
on that one, I relate. I mean, my parents, when I was 12, my dad left home. He was addicted to alcohol. It was a tough childhood. However, I learned many gifts from that. So let's just ask you, let's just take that. Like your parents split. You came from another country to another country. For some, that's challenging, especially when you're young. Although you don't have that prefrontal cortex developed, the brain isn't quite adult. What was the hardest thing of adjusting to that? And what strength did you get through that chapter in your life?
I mean, they're two different chapters. I think the moving, I remember very little, as you say, but stories that my mum tells me, I was very worried from a British perspective. Some mean kid in nursery, would have been here in the UK,
Yeah.
told me that there were rattlesnakes in Brazil, and I was terrified to go to Brazil because I was afraid there'd be rattlesnakes. That's
Oh
what
my
my mum
goodness.
says, that I didn't want to go because I was afraid there might be snakes. But
Wow.
I mean, that's as much as I remember from
Yeah.
that time, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, the uh, the stuff with my parents separating was it was soon after my brother was born.
Mm.
So I have a brother who's 11 years younger than me from
Yeah.
both mom and dad. And so it was kind of, I think what that meant was that, my dad left, and at 11, I became sort of like, in inverted commas, the man of the house. Of course, I wasn't, but
Sure.
I assumed a lot of the responsibilities for my younger brother, in terms of, helping out and so on. And I guess it was a growing up for me in many ways.
Sure.
Uh, my dad has since remarried, and he has two other children, my brother and sister, whom I love dearly as well. So now we're a group of four, and we've got this WhatsApp group, and we badmouth our dad, and it's like, but that's like normal, I guess.
Okay, there's a note to self, everyone. Start a WhatsApp group so you can badmouth your parents,
Your
but stay
siblings, yeah.
connected. That's awesome. Hey, listen, thanks for taking us back. I mean, it's really important. You're kind of being humanized now to us because we know about the great work that you're doing in public. So let's take the journey into the next little step here in Plato's Garden. And I want to make a quick announcement to the audience who's sticking with us that if you're enjoying the show so far on the YouTube channel, give it a like and the subscribe. That actually gets the analytics interested in sharing this episode when it comes out. The surprise is that I've created a game show, and you and I are going to have some fun in just a little bit. It's called The Future is Unscripted Game Show. So I put on my creative thinking hat inspired by Pedro, everyone. So stay with us till the very end because we're going to be playing a game show. So have I freaked you out? Are you going to leave now, or are you going to stick around, Pedro?
Absolutely not. I mean,
Okay.
it takes a lot to freak me out, especially
Yeah.
with, and I love improvisation and unscripted. So that's
Okay,
cool.
awesome. Awesome. I showed my wife last night because it was late, and we were while she was binge watching with me some TV, and I was creating this thing. She go, "What are you doing?" So we'll see how it comes. So more on that later. Let's get into turning the corner now to the Mezzo area, what I call the sector around sort of where you've been creating your public works. And I would say this theme is how your work impacts society. So here's a thought, and let's riff on it. In your performance for Futures method, I think that's something. You've worked with asylum-seeking minors, UN officials, students. So what is a real-world example? Give us one where that approach changed someone's thinkings or actions.
It is a difficult question because so much of what we do is and the work in futures and in futures literacy deals with the intangible,
Yeah,
deals with change of affect, change and feeling. So you can do surveys at the end. You can do, and people kind of like tick boxes and say, yeah, it changed the way I thought, and so on. But it never really seems to capture the depth of the transformation, which is sometimes quite subtle.
yeah,
Um, I did. I think if I can perhaps talk about the the, the Futures Literacy Theatre Lab that we did with asylum-seeking young
please.
people in Greece, that was quite something because uh, we were in an environment with uh, young boys, young men, really, of about 9 different nationalities, lots of different languages,
Yeah,
really, really crammed place. They're living under very, very difficult conditions. And we partnered with a local NGO who told us from the very start, you're not allowed to talk about the past. This is
really.
a futures workshop.
Wow.
Their past is traumatic. Uh, we, focus on the future. Now, the Futures Literacy Lab is a structure that was designed. It's a tool that has a specific structure that was designed by Riel Miller, who used to be the head of Foresight and Futures Literacy at UNESCO, actually.
Okay.
And and the structure has sort of like 3 stages. And normally, the Futures Literacy Lab is run with in corporate environments or whatever, it's it tends to be run with flip charts and post-it notes and stuff. And
I
and
see.
and
Yeah.
my idea was to replace those with human bodies and to replace some of the stuff that would have been spoken with stuff that would be physicalized. And one of the, I think, most beautiful and powerful moments was at the final stage of the lab, when participants need to reflect on how their anticipatory assumptions, the way they think about the future, might have changed throughout the process of the lab. But we asked them to do that physically through a series of 3 movements to create a phrase, a physical score with 3 movements about how their feelings kind of
Yeah.
journeyed and their thoughts journeyed throughout. And so, in a group of boys who had it, really
Yeah,
tough for some time, and who'd had who often were even within the structures of the lab were playing really tough and kind of like being, performing a masculinity that that was necessary perhaps for survival in their understanding,
I see. And were
through
they
the
like
journeys that they've been through.
teenager youth, young?
Teenagers,
Wow,
they were like from
amazing,
12
amazing.
till 18 or something, and
Yeah,
they just were able to express themselves physically with such delicacy and vulnerability that even though I can't put a word to it, I say something has happened there, something has shifted there,
sure.
and that for me is really, really important.
Hey, Pedro, thank you. Everybody, we're here with Pedro de Senna. I mean, he's a outstanding teacher, educator. By the way, are we both working on something in common right now through Middlesex University? You want to tell everybody about what that is?
So we absolutely are. We are both candidates in a program which is a DProf brackets TD by PW. It's the longest acronym ever. So it's a Doctorate of Professional Studies, and it's TD because it's transdisciplinary, and it's PW because it's by Public Works. So the
Yeah,
idea
very
is
cool.
that we take our public output, the stuff that we've put out there in the world, the stuff that we do, uh, and look at it with the transdisciplinary lens and kind of frame it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited now. I think you're submitting your thesis, or you'll be around June, from what I understand from your note. Everybody, I'm submitting mine in July, and there's a lot to that. A thesis could be 30 to 45,000 words. Then you have to kind of defend it, I guess, where you're in a room for a couple hours and you get to present, and then you have professors asking you questions. I'm shaking in my boots, man, because you've got so much brilliance with your background. I come from an executive background, chief executive officer in business. I've self-educated through programs, but I am learning so much, and I bless you for doing the show, Pedro, because one of the things I'm critiquing everyone is my collection of podcasts. This is approaching 300 interviews now that I've done on this show. So Pedro will be part of my thesis and research. So it's wonderful. I have a funny
Happened to
sense.
myself.
Yeah, thank you. I have a funny sense of humor sometimes. This little sticky memo here. Just a moment ago, Pedro said in his lab, now we get what a lab is. It's kind of this experiential thing. See, in business, when I do things like communications workshops, I'll have 10, 15 executives or leaders in a room. We'll have flip charts, sticky memos. I thought it was just so cute when you said we replace stickies with people. So there's the sticky. Oh, there's Tom. That's kind of what it looks like. But the Twilight Zone, I wonder if our viewers out there would like to see something in action. I'm going to put a video back on the screen. We're going to watch it. It's only about a minute, and then we're going to ask you to tell us about it. So just let's watch this together. I'm going to just get back to the play button. Here we go.
We're experimenting with tools at this point. We're developing our tools, developing our ways to think about it. I don't know how the particular exercises we did today here in this particular lab can be scaled up. But I think what we do is they might not be scalable, but they might be multipliable. In other words, if you create capacity to run these labs, you might have a multiplication of that and just get people to think about their relationship with the future differently. By my reckoning, but I would say that because I come from theater background, the theater is perhaps the final place of resistance where people will still meet, where people will still encounter and will still work out ideas and battle ideas as they've been doing for 2,500 years.
All right, I'm going to take that off the screen again. There's that good-looking guy again with the same haircut as mine. Pedro, tell us what we just saw there. Just describe it even more than what you were saying.
So that was before I needed glasses. That was 2019.
Join
So by the
the
way,
club, man.
yeah. So that was 2019, and so if you remember, my Twitter epiphany was 2018,
Was that
right?
pre-COVID?
And
Pre-COVID?
That was pre-COVID. Yeah, that was
Wow,
December 19. So
crazy.
my Twitter encounter was in 2018, and through conversation with my colleague and friend in Greece, we organized that lab that I described a few minutes ago, and that was like the proof of concepts that actually, yeah, these tools can really work, that theater can really work for this. And it was a proof of concept in a really, really tough environment that, this Greek island with these asylum-seeking young men. So following that, we presented some of our findings at a conference in Oslo, and we were invited uh, to participate in this thing called the Futures Literacy Design Global Futures Literacy Design Forum
Yeah,
at UNESCO headquarters in Paris in December 2019. And what we did that was we ran a sort of a mini version of the Futures Literacy Lab with some of the people who were there,
yeah,
experimenting with some of those tools. And so what you're seeing there is people at UNESCO headquarters being physically manhandled, manipulated by me. Kind of, we were working with some techniques. Which come from actually a Brazilian theater practitioner called Augusto Boal,
wow,
and he created this method called the theater of the oppressed. And a lot of the tools that I employ in Performance for Futures come from the arsenal of tools of the theater of the oppressed. He used
interesting.
to talk about the theater as a rehearsal for revolution. You work out things that can then happen in daily life.
Yeah. Interesting. So, theater of the oppressed. Define what that means when you say oppressed, just generally.
So, Boyle comes from a sort of a tradition of theater making
Yeah.
and thought, which is a kind of a left wing sort of Marxist thought via Bertolt Brecht, who was a German theater maker in the first half of the 20th century, and recognizing that there are structural oppressions that we face, and together with something that came from a Brazilian school of thought of education called the pedagogy of the oppressed, which talks about empowering dialogic work where the teacher-student relationship is not flipped, but it's changed so that we're talking as equals, I guess, to go back to Plato's garden and to the
Yeah.
academy, that is a conversation, and that learning is really dialogic. And Boal took this idea and um, said, well, theater can also be dialogic. Is not just about dialogue between people on stage, but also between the spectator, the person who's in the audience, and the person who is performing. And he created this figure called the spectator, a combination of the spectator and the actor,
Oh,
somebody
that's
who
cool.
can, from watching a situation, kind of step in and
Yeah.
take initiative and take become subject, if you like, and not just a passive observer of a situation, and rehearse and practice how might they act differently. One last thing, a key thing, and this is where I think there's a big connection with futures as well, is that uh, a lot of theater, particularly in the Greek tradition, has this idea of fate, of inevitability,
Yeah.
and since Brecht, as I mentioned, and other theater practitioners, and for Boal in particular, uh, nothing is inevitable. There is always a choice. And what the theater of the oppressed tries to do is to say, well, you chose this, but you could have chosen differently. And that really connects with futures, because futures thinking is about saying there isn't necessarily a predetermined future. There isn't one timeline that will follow. Every choice that we make at every moment will affect the outcomes of the possible and probable futures.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm just riffing in my mind here. That's why we're doing storytelling. I'm trying to put myself in that room. I just put the screen back up there, watching these people doing this, and going back to my only frame of reference, which is corporate North America, where we're in rooms sometimes with consultants and we're doing role playing and we're interacting and whatnot. So there's sort of a parallel to this in some way. So with something like this, a lab, could that be taken into a business and applied there?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is a hard sell. because you want to kind of convince the suits that it's okay
Sure.
for them to roll on the floor. But I absolutely think so, and we know, I mean, even so, like neuroscience tells us that
Yeah,
embodied thinking kind of
for sure.
releases different ways of seeing problems, of approaching things. So yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
it's a useful environment for it to
I,
happen.
I want to just riff on that for a minute. It's funny, everyone. You heard Pedro. I think you said it's okay to roll on the floor, tough sell. Interesting, from my 30 some odd years in business as an executive, the highest level was a chief executive officer. I had teams of these high ego, very smart people. And I used to think that, and I'm studying this in my thesis right now about the masks we wear in business as leaders. We're afraid to take the mask off and show our vulnerability because the conditions of relationship generally, when you're a high level leader, there's authority, and you can't get too close, otherwise you can't discipline people or you can't give tough feedback. And that is all just absolutely incorrect, because a lot of the people I work with in business would tell me privately that they went to Tony Robbins events, where Tony Robbins, if you know any of his stuff, he does immersion and people are interacting and they're rolling on the floors. And so I started thinking, that's interesting, because here is proof of what I'm finding out through my own research, is that most people are human beings running businesses. They would love to bring something like this lab into their arena. And if it's positioned in a different way, I think we can make some inroads. So you and I are going to have some more talks about that. Everybody who's watching now, thank you for staying on. I'm thrilled that we have so many people live watching. I can see it in the dashboard. Are you having fun? I think I am. Pedro looks like he's having fun. So Pedro, I promised everybody that we're going to do a little game show. This is completely new to me. And so I've designed this. It may be just great. It may be crap. Who knows? We'll figure it out. But are you ready to play a game show? It's called The Future is Unscripted. Are you ready?
Always.
Okay. So I'm going to add something to the stage. Then we're going to tidy all this up through editing. So what you're seeing for those watching us is you're peeking in the studio on a live stream. So the things that we're going to do, I'm going to say things, that's all going to be taken out. So let me take a sip of tea here. Okay. I think you're in the evening in the UK, right? You're around about 8 hours ahead of me.
Yeah.
After dinner,
Yeah,
and we're
it's almost
getting
7 p.m.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on late. God bless you. Thank you to you and your family, or to your family, for allowing you to be away from them for this time.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put up on the stage here. Just okay, I'm going to put that up there. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to lose you. I'm just going to play with a setting here. So I created this image called The Future is Unscripted. This is a game show image. So if we're on a TV show, this would come up. So let's just put us back on the screen here for a minute with that. So hold on. Yeah, I know you're getting a picture here. Let me see if I can. There we go.
I want to hear the music.
Well, that's a part, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go 3, 2, 1, and we may have to do a couple of cuts on this. I'm gonna do a little preamble, introduce some music, and then have this image on the screen, and then I'm gonna give some instructions as the host of the game show, and then you're just gonna take it from there and do something, some fun things, and we're gonna wrap up. The whole experience, everyone, is about 5 minutes. That's what I planned. So just let me just see if I can do this on the fly. Never done this before. So hold on a minute. I've got to just hold on.
Just so that everybody's aware, I had no idea this was coming. Right? So
He didn't. And
but I'm very excited though.
Okay, I know. I was saying to my wife Anna, he's so creative, and this is the world he lives in. I know nothing about it. I wonder he's going to get excited. Now you can see my studio camera here, everyone. If you can look on the screen there, I've got a sheet of paper. Okay, so this is the script I prepared for the game show. So let me just remove that out of there, put us back on screen again. I think we'll take this angle here. Okay. All right, so 3, 2, 1. Everybody, welcome to The Future is Unscripted. The Future is Unscripted. where we're going to have Pedro de Senna interpret a surreal image containing 3 elements and create a live story, maybe a scene, and I'm going to challenge him to have a lot of fun doing this. And this is a mashup of multiple things that we're going to put on the screen in just a minute. All right, so we're going to put the image back up there. All right, Pedro's taking his glasses. He's taking a look at this image. Let me just talk at Pedro. He's not doing anything yet. So, Pedro, let's have some fun. You're a master of blending theater, futures, and storytelling. And so this is your challenge. This image on the screen is a mashup of 3 different worlds. So what is your job is to create a live performance concept or a scene or short story using what you see there. You can set it in the past or present or future, however your imagination takes you. So I want you to take a minute here. I'm going to give you about a minute to let this sink in. And then when you're ready, just put up your hand and then I'm going to ask you to talk to us. So Pedro's thinking right now, and he's going to tell me when he's ready.
Okay, I think I mean I got a sort of a sort of obvious sort of thing, and it's a bit physical.
Okay, so you just tell me when you're ready. I just say ready, and then I'm going to let you have the time. You just tell us when you're ready.
Okay.
Everybody, we're the Future Unscripted game show here with Pedro de Senna.
I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Just probably I'm not ready at all, but that's cool. Go for it.
Okay. All right. So now over to you, Pedro. It's showtime.
Do the people out there, can they see the image? Have they seen it as well?
Yeah. So the image is on the screen for those watching the live stream, and the video when it's produced will see this image. Those on the audio, when it's a podcast, will only hear you. So take that information and do whatever you want with it. And so some of the things that you might talk about is what's the first thing that jumps out at you? Is if this was a scene in a play or film, who are the characters? What's happening? How these 3 elements connect? Give us the title, like what this performance world might be. Explain what you're seeing there so the audience can observe. Whatever you want to do, it's showtime.
So I'll describe what I see because my response is physical as well. I mean, those of you who can see, kind of suddenly I stood up, I pushed my chair back, I want to stretch out both ends. So what I'm doing now, for those who are not seeing and just listening, is I'm standing up, leaning forward with my arms outstretched on either side, and that's because of the 3 images that Tom gave me. The image in the center is an image of a traditional theater, proscenium arch, some red velvet chairs and red curtains. The image on the right looks like something from an archaeological site from the past. Could be somewhere in the Andes, or it could be somewhere maybe in Southeast Asia. A figure like a stone temple of some sort. And the figure on the left is this futuristic city where there are things, these giant cubes that are floating up, and I'm picking up boxes that are on my desk, which is very messy, and kind of making them float up as well. So I'm just kind of throwing things up in the air or lifting them up. And so I'm stretching out because this image really, the way Tom organized it for me is useful, because the theater is at the center of it. It's connecting this thing from the past, this archaeological site, to this thing from the future, this potential image here. And I think the job of theater is perhaps to help people establish this connection. And this is as far as I got.
We're going to add me back to the screen here, everyone. Let me just turn that up. We'll tidy up all the sound effects here. Just let me just move a few things around here.
Have floating boxes.
All right, we give a big round of applause to Pedro de Senna for reacting, acting, whatever he wants to call it, live on the Futures Unscripted game show. Hey, Pedro, you did fantastic. Just now, do a recap for the audience, what exactly you were doing there in the context of this, futures work that you do. Just explain it.
Okay, I mean, rather clumsily and without a warm up or anything or warning. What I did, I th- was I try to use what the tool that theater gives me,
Yeah,
which is the ability to think with your body, not just with your brain. So theater is about bodies in space and relating to each other. Bodies and objects, of course, theater happens in 3D. And go back to that video where you said, there's two people in a room, there's an act of theater there. So the image that you presented me with was an image that had a particular spatial organization, theater at
sure.
the center between something that had a kind of a past vibe and something that has potentially a future vibe. At least that's how I read the images.
Yeah,
And so my first instinct was to physicalize that, to place myself as the theater person at the center, like in
I
your
love it.
image. Uh, and to try and reach out to this past, to this tradition, and to the future. And that's really important for me because now, I mean, that's the thing. When you're doing it, you don't think about it in those terms, but then you have the sense making moment, which is really crucial, which is what you're asking me to do now. And one of the things that I've been particularly interested in lately is working with uh, global South indigenous knowledges and how these might relate to futures. And so there's an indigenous thinker from Brazil called Ailton Krenak. Um, he talks about ancestral futures. So in a way, perhaps what I was doing subconsciously was trying to bring some of this knowledge uh, uh, that is maybe ancestral into the world of futures thinking through theater, through my work. So there's maybe a decolonizing the future kind of thing that I was doing there
I, lo-
physically, trying
I
to say maybe the future has more of that.
sure.
Um,
I love that word
and
decolonizing. So
mhm.
I first of all, that was brilliant. Everybody, virtual applause for Pedro. And what's going to be awesome is when we have this edit and release the actual broadcast, to see him in action from end to end with all these explanations. I think it's a teaching video that's going to go viral. This is exactly basically you built a world for us from scratch live, which I thought was fantastic. Your ability shows. So it's like mic drop, everyone. There is a chat feature. If you're on still, you want to put a comment in there, feel free to do that. Pedro, before we move on, just a couple of things here with you. How does this kind of creative thinking help people see the future differently? I mean, what's the one lesson in this experience that you might want people to have?
From playing your game or from like mobile from
From what you
from what
what you just did, if somebody's watching it back or they experienced it,
uh
how does it change their thinking about the future? How might it? Anything at all?
okay, I think if I take a step back and then I try to kind of bring the game into it,
Sure.
there there's this key idea in future studies, which is the future does not yet exist,
Yes.
right? So even though we call it future studies, we're not really studying the future because there's no data. What we're studying is the relationship that we have with the future. The anticipatory assumptions, the hopes, the fears, the thoughts, the plans that we make, right? So that's where the data is. Not just human beings, non-human beings also have anticipatory systems and processes. So I guess the consequence of that as well is that we are also a product of these hopes and fears as much as we are a product of our past. We tend to think of ourselves as being like there's this history behind us that lead us to where we are, and our decisions today are influenced by the past. But our decisions that we make today are also influenced by these images of the future that we have. And
Very cool.
so by placing ourselves in the middle between the past and the future, I guess maybe what that's saying is, and that's where the game comes in, and another way of making sense of that physicalization is that we are, the game that you just gave, that you just showed me, that you just made me play, is that we are in this moment, in the present, being shaped by the past, but also shaped by the future. In fact, there's a tool in futures studies called the futures triangle,
Yeah.
which talks about these three aspects. You have the weight of the past, the push of the present, and the pull of the future. And in a way, your image in three parts kind of gave me a little bit of that.
Love it. Thanks everybody again with Pedro de Senna here. Just finished the game show. So I have a thing I want to throw out at you, just a thought. And you describe, I'm just going to generalize here and maybe ask you to comment. When we describe the future as not present, not past, in our world, I think the world we live in that's obsessed with predicting trends and outcomes, like everybody wants to know. How can this perspective help now business leaders and organizations make better decisions today? How can we apply this? What can better business leaders learn from this thinking?
The first thing they can learn is that you can't predict,
Wow.
and futurists are not in the business of predicting the future.
Yeah.
When we don't have crystal balls, in spite of our bald heads, we can't read, can't do that, so it's not what we're about. Um, what we can do, I mean, two things really, and there are two really broad camps, if you like. Camps might not be the right word, but two broad areas in which futures studies kind of works. On the one hand, there is what we call anticipation for the future, which is where we make plans, where we strategize, where we maybe look at possible different scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? So,
Yeah.
and be prepared for different eventualities. So that's anticipation for the future. But on the other hand, there is anticipation for emergence, which is our understanding that stuff happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that the world throws curveballs at us, and that life throws curveballs at us, and that requires a degree of adaptability and resilience and nimbleness of foot. And to be properly futures literate, you need to be able to do both. You need to be able to plan and strategize and think of different alternatives, but you also need to be able to adapt and respond to emergent situations as they happen.
Interesting. I've been thinking when you're talking, just riffing, my mind goes on journeys here, that if I have a room where I'm doing one of these labs or you're facilitating it, we may have different demographics, different age groups mixed up in there. And in my public practice where I do coaching and in consulting, I use personality science. And I've learned through different frameworks. There's a Dr. Taylor Hartman. I use his people code, which is a motive-based personality assessment. That some people are expressive, some people aren't. Some people fear, public expression or sharing. Maybe they have a motive of peace. You put them all in a room like this, and then you get all of that stuff mashing up. And I would imagine in some of these labs, and putting the picture back on the screen of this one from your video, that there's a lot of personal growth going on in those rooms. And so just talk about that. What has your experience been in terms of how these can actually help people grow personally? And do you mix up the demographics and put young people and older people to get more, I guess I'll call it critical thinking, or maybe even neurodiverse type of thinking?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question, because there are two answers to that, really. The first one is absolutely, and I think theater and play is a great leveler, because
Mm.
we all played, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely important to emphasize that you don't have to be an actor, you don't have to be a theater person to participate in a
Phew,
futures
thank goodness.
literacy theater lab or a performance for futures. It's because it happens through games in a really, really playful way. So generally speaking, yes, you can mix and match. And in the video that you had, we had some really young people who were attending the forum because they had schools visiting, and they had some, like, guy working for NATO or whatever. So there's
Yeah.
different people kind of doing that sort of stuff. Having said that, the second answer, and perhaps that's something that's to do with my learning,
Mm.
is that I once ran this lab with a group of postgraduate students at Middlesex University, actually.
Okay.
And it wasn't this lab, this structure, but it was a performance for futures workshop
Yeah.
with different types of games. Uh, And at the end of it, when we asked for feedback, there were a couple of people who were neurodivergent, and they said, I felt quite uncomfortable
Define
with
neurodivergent just for the audience who aren't academic or understand that.
so neurodivergent people who do not fall within what is considered to be the norm of our sort of neurological pathways,
Okay.
in terms of, so people with different conditions, for example, being in the autistic spectrum. Okay, so a couple of people who said, you put me in a room full of people and asked me to move around. It really felt uncomfortable for me, and
Gotcha.
and and that yeah, and that taught me that you really need to be paying attention to who you're working with. And I'm not making excuses for myself, but at that point, it was a fairly small room, really, really crowded. So there wasn't, an ideal number of people for a workshop like this. Maybe it's 12, 15 at the most. And I was working with like 35 people in a room. So you can't really give everybody and pay attention to the people who are starting to feel a bit uncomfortable and so on. Generally, as a facilitator, your job is to also look after the participants in a workshop. And so that taught me that I really need to be careful and work with, really work with smaller groups and pay attention. Or work with
Gotcha.
a second facilitator if we're working with a larger group, so that you're co-facilitating and really being able to care for, because it's really important that you do.
No, that's really helpful. Have you ever done anything with people with disabilities?
Yes, I mean, not just in my futures practice, but in my theater practice. For like 15 years now, I've been working with a theater company, a dance theater company called Sign Dance Collective International. They are a dance theater company. The basis of their choreographic language is sign language.
Ah,
And so I mean, their work is incredible, beautiful, and starts from a point of view of difference, and in art, difference is great.
no,
So
that's
it's,
awesome.
it's beautiful.
Now I'm having fun because I remember when I introduced you, your resume had you do some languages in sign. So I'm gonna just put you on the spot here. I'm gonna full screen you for a minute. Sign something to us and then tell us what you said. Something inspiring or anything at all. It can be silly, like I'm here and having fun. So I'm gonna full screen you and just go for it.
So I
What did you
apologize
say?
for any fluent signers. This is my attempt at British Sign Language. What you didn't say is that, my level of sign language is really low. I'm fluent in a
Okay.
few languages, but sign language is like low level. So I just like my name is Pedro, and my sign name is Pedro. This is a name that's given to you by the deaf community when you have your first sign name. So it's like taking off a hat and throwing it on the floor. That's the name they gave me. But then what I did was I finger spelled my name in British Sign Language, so Pedro.
Yeah.
And I said I really like working with you, Tom. So I finger spelled your name because you don't have a sign name yet, as far as I know. So
Ah.
that's it.
All right, virtual applause for you there, my friend. That was a lot of fun, and that'll be a great clip. You can get my madness here that these videos I do viral short clips, so we're going to have all this production stuff that'll basically put you out to the world to help people in so many different ways. One more thing I want to.
I'm going to have a lot of deaf people telling me off for misappropriating this.
Okay. Hey, don't worry about that. By the
Sorry.
way, it's funny because we have our provincial government, so sometimes they do the media events or updates when there's things like weather events, and you'll have this little box in the screen with the sign person doing all these things. Some really radical, non-intentional body language that comes out of that from their faces. I
Bear in
call
mind, it's
this.
British Sign Language that I try to use, yeah, because there are
Oh,
obviously, different countries, different parts
yeah,
of the world have
yeah,
their own sign languages, yeah.
absolutely. I mean, you have your own language. You have your own language, man. When I grew up, again, I spent 2 years in the UK, born on a military base, a garrison in Tidworth. And even with Professor Kate, who we both know, talking to her, these little words come out sometimes like bits and bobs. My mom, the brolly, which is the umbrella, the boot, which is the trunk. I still use some of those words in my language. And when I came to Canada, my dad used to take reel-to-reel tapes, audio tapes of us back in the day. And I have a few somewhere buried where I have very thick, strong British accent. So I always thought watching movies that, some of these British accent actors, they get more dates. I didn't get many dates in high school, so maybe I should have used my accent more. I have a last question I want to put at you, then we want to honor you as we go to wrap up with some cool things. This is a new segment called Book Unwritten, and I might actually create a second podcast segment, a special segment going forward on this. So Pedro, if you were to write a book today that would change the world, and there wasn't any barriers, and I know you can't predict the future, with everything you've done and what you haven't done, what would that book be, or even a title? And yeah,
so you, I mean, seriously, I mean, I have this book. The book you want to write. It's actually called Theater Games for the Future.
Wow.
50 tools to change the time after now.
Oh, I love that.
And so it's an exercise book with performance for futures tools. I'm actually in the proposal writing for that book. Hopefully, in a couple of years' time, you invite me and say, "Hey, here's the book." Because it is about changing the time after now, changing, transforming the world. So you thank you for that plug, like in advance.
I'm so inspired by you and by that. And by the way, you're absolutely welcome to come back in the future. And you see on my studio here, I'm madly making notes in my little books. I'm writing this down, future book. You're a quiet warrior now. You're part of the community. You come back. I promise you, I'll read your book. I'll do a 5-star review if it's worthy. Put it out there. The other thing, shameless plug here, is I just launched last year my own publishing company. So we have other ways we can help you. But that is so awesome. Tell us again, what was the title of that book that you had in the mind?
It was called Theater Games for the Future.
Well, you heard it right here, everyone.
Yeah.
On the Quiet Warrior Show, Theater Games for the Future. Okay, now it's my turn to honor you, my friend. As I said to you, we were going to be riffing for an hour. Have you had fun today, by the way, Pedro?
Very much so, very much so. I there is a plug that I want to make, but I can do it after. But it's a really important plug to me. But I can do it afterwards if you
you can do it now. You can do it now. Let's be spontaneous. Go for it.
So segueing from what you said earlier about language, it's really important. And the thing that I'm currently doing, I think that I'm really, really proud of, is that together with some other people, we are launching a Brazilian Association of Futurists. And so it's an association of professionals who work in the field of futures, who are either Brazilian living abroad or Brazilian in Brazil, or foreigners who live in Brazil, but obviously it has a Brazilian identity to it.
Yeah.
We have our official launch on the 28th of March. It's going to be an online thing. Watch the space. We've gone through the bureaucracy. The paperwork is done, but we're kind of like organizing an online event. So we will be announcing that soon.
Okay.
But a couple of things that we're doing there is really, really important. And one is to trying to define what is this thing, this futurist. What does a futurist do in Brazil, in a Brazilian context? Are there tools that are specifically ours? That kind of idea of decolonization, but also the language. Because a lot of future studies and future thinking, and my reading included, happen in English and in languages from the global north. Okay, Portuguese is a language from the global north as well. But can we find a vocabulary that is actually ours to talk about these things, and that and tools that emerge from our experiences and our cultures and so on. So I'm really, really proud to be part of that group of people who have founded this, and we will have our launch next month. So please stay tuned.
I think that's wonderful. No such thing as a shameless plug. That's an awesome plug, and we're going to capture that, and that'll be in this for future view. I just have a comment that came in from somebody I know. That's my wife. And if you see it on the screen there, thoughtful insight, Pedro. She's still watching. She loves what you've seen. The interesting thing, my wife is Italian, born in just outside of Rome. We've been married 29 years, Anna. And she is a very creative person, very creative. And I could see her facilitating or being in one of those labs, doing a really good job with something like that, what you're teaching us. Well, now it's time to honor you, my friend. I have an award for you. Did you know you were getting an award today?
I did not.
Well, now you,
You keep throwing surprises at me. Like,
if I
what for? What did I do?
if I ask you that again, you go, yeah, now I know, because Tom told me. So I put this is my action cam. I'm just taking you inside the studio here. I'm going to get a different view here. All right. Hey, everybody, I'm waving at you. Oh, we've got somebody else here who's got a comment. We'll put it up there to honor Carolina. I can't even butcher the last name, Poku. Thank you, Carolina. Amazing. Isn't he amazing? He absolutely is. And that was for you too, Carolina, for being amazing and putting in a comment. Those are now etched in the production, and it makes it real. It tells people that we had audiences watching us. Absolutely fantastic. All right, Pedro, you are now being inducted. Yeah, you're being inducted into a very important global community. When I started this show, I wanted to have the 1% of people, I call it, come to the show. These are people who have taken their childhood stories, their journeys along the way, discovered something about themselves, the hero's journey, then gone out in the world and created artifacts or created things that made an impact to help the world, to change the world. It's very hard to get on my show, as you know. I vet people hard. We've done just only about 300 interviews, and you're special. So I wanted an award when I started this show, and I created what's called the challenge coin. So do you know what challenge coins are?
I've heard you talk about challenge coins because I've heard some of your other shows. So
for the audience, and it comes with this little sleeve. It's manufactured by the coin maker. The history of challenge coins were the surfaced during World War I era, Pedro. The practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit was popular with the Army Special Forces. And carrying the coin at all times and presenting it when challenged to prove affiliation with the unit resulted in a number of consequences for those who could not produce a coin. The most popular required the coinless soldier to buy a round of drinks. And that practice, by the way, continues to be popular today. My dad was a commanding officer in the British and Canadian forces, and he was in AA most of his life, recovering from addiction, and he had his own version of coins. So this is the coin, and I'm biased. I think it's the most beautiful coin. It's hand-painted and crafted, raised letters. The front is the image of the Quiet Warrior show. The back is the incredible narrative of the hero's journey from Joe Campbell's work, fully illustrated. It's the map of the journey that you and many of the warriors come to the show have taken in life. So congratulations. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior community.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if you drink, but if we meet when we meet in real life, which I hope we will soon,
we will.
Even if I have the coin, I will buy you a drink.
Okay, well, thank you. And I am coming to London next year because that apparently is when they're going to do my graduation at Middlesex University, and I am honored. We will meet, and I usually mail coins, but you will tell me off show. You can send me an address, what you prefer, I can present it to you when I see you, or you'll mail it. But I want to get a picture with you somewhere meaningful with the coin. And then finally, before I wrap up here and give you the last word, I want to add something to the stage because I was inspired so much by your concept of and topic of futures in theater. As you know, we created the Futures Unscripted game show. Everyone, if you just joined us and you didn't see it, come back, watch this. And the replay is going to stay online until it's produced officially. But I did this. I created a new challenge coin. And the challenge coin, if it comes to life, would be the Future Forge challenge coin. Now, I know I'm getting all excited. That's who I am. But you can see there's some typos here because AI doesn't exactly spell right. But I kind of instructed AI and I gave it some parameters. So you got the Quiet Warrior show and the Quiet Warrior show up top on the front, top of the coin, an image that's kind of futuristic. And then this whole thing about Future Forge, I really could shape the next parts of the next way I do my podcast in the future. The back of the coin would be the Future Forge, but the bottom wording it was supposed to be, as it's not that clear, for those who fearlessly shape the future. And that, my friend, would be you. So you got to see the very first Future Forge coin here, right on the Quiet Warrior show, thanks to your inspiration.
Thank you. That's really nice. And I love the image on the front actually because it's got this kind of this tree vibe as well. And we've been kind of thinking, as I said, and that kind of
Yeah.
thinking about ways to decolonize futures, that futures are not necessarily technological, that but that we can learn from nature,
Yeah.
and the various branches where time can go. There is not predetermined, and this is the key thing, and even our efforts to forge the future can sometimes be futile, and we need to be okay with that.
That's a great narrative. So on that note, I'm going to let you have the last word, Pedro. Tell everybody anything you want and where people can get a hold of you. You might have a website or anything at all.
I guess if people want to get hold of me and learn a little bit more about Performance for Futures, do email performanceforfutures@gmail.com. It's the simplest way. Look me up on LinkedIn as well. There's no functioning website that I can speak of at this point. It's just not good enough, so I took it off air. But soon there will be. Hopefully, we'll be able to spread the word. But
Fantastic.
reach out. I'm generally quite. My parents are teachers. I was a teacher for long, so if people ask me, I will come and talk to them. It's like,
Well, something tells me you and I are going to have a lot to talk about as I evolve my public agency after I finished my doctorate. I can tell you there's a lot of threads. My dad, who passed away in 2018, by the way, died unexpectedly. But dad, I didn't know him that well, but he was a teacher, and he taught at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. And they told me that there's a book here that I might have shown earlier, the 212 Soldiers for the Queen. He was a British soldier, worked on the aircraft, but my dad was very, very smart, and he really encouraged us as boys. I have two brothers, to value education, and then he went and became a teacher. So that thread I really appreciated in you and your story. So everybody, let's wrap up here and find that true passion like you see from Pedro here. It's so exciting. Go back and watch the interview. It stays on the feed, and live the life that you deserve and desire. And we'll see you all again on the Quiet Warrior Show. We got a lot of great things coming up. Pedro, thank you so much. I honor you, man.
thank you for having me, Tom.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, stand by, Pedro. I'm going to take us offline, and your fan club is still there live watching us, so it's pretty inspiring. I'm clicking a button.